Welcome to this NORA startup webinar titled AI and Pedagogics. We have invited specialists both from academia and the startup world to introduce how they are currently using artificial intelligence and machine learning in, among other, early childhood learning, detecting reading difficulties, and using new technologies as a helpful tool to both teachers and students to create a good learning experience. We will dive into the complex fields of AI and pedagogic to see how these questions can be answered. With us today, we have with us from NEDI, Ida Dahl, who's Chief Product Officer, and Jakob Voigt, who's an industrial PhD candidate. We have with us Njål Foldnes, Professor and Project Manager for the company Gameplay. We have Diana Saplasan, Senior Researcher at University of Oslo, connected to the Robin Group. And of course, we have with us Erlend Aune, Associate Professor in Data Science at BI Norwegian Business School. We'll get three presentations from Nedi, Njål, and Diana, and then we'll have, as always, a debate among all the participants. Most important to keep in mind is that this is for you, the audience. So if you have any questions, please put them out in the chat or in the question and answering system. And me, Morten Goodwin, who is a professor in artificial intelligence at the University of Agder, will try to ask the questions to the correct participants. So first off is Nedi, and Nedi is an edtech startup who is passionate about creating better learning and more personalized learning journeys. The technology needed to deliver that promise just needs to put in the right context, since we have a promise of an open modular architecture that is NEDI, this edtech-driven system for AI. So Ida and Jakob from NEDI, please, can you tell us a bit more about your company?
Of course, of course. All right. Can you see the slide now?
Perfectly, yes.
Good. So, hello, my name is Jacob. This is Ida. And I'll be presenting NEDI, our vision for learning and our research into AI and learning analytics. This is our core team. As I mentioned, my name is Jacob. I'm a data scientist at NEDI. And I will be taking an industrial PhD in cooperation with the University of Agder. I'm very lucky to have Morten, our moderator, here today as my supervisor. And we are doubly lucky to have him also on our board of directors in NEDI. Ida, our Chief Product Officer, an experienced teacher, and our EdTech specialist, is also here today. Our core statement is that each child should be able to realize their true potential. And we believe that personalized learning and AI has a key role to play in this endeavor. In order to realize personalized learning, we need to solve these four key issues. There's a low adaptation of AI in schools. Generally, we have static approaches, textbook approaches to learning. We have fragmented platforms where learning applications do not share information amongst each other. We have a lack of content, a lack of organization of content, so that teachers planning their activities for class, they may not be aware of what they have at their disposal, and they may be lacking access to certain content that they could be utilizing. So we will be there to provide the teachers with the right content in the right context. Also, of course, privacy is very important, especially when we're talking about the children and the education. So we need to have really good privacy policies. We already have models and partners in place for 3 of these issues. And today I will be talking about how we're going to use AI in this endeavor. So we believe that this should not happen in a vacuum. It's very important to pool resources together. So therefore, together with our partner schools, organization, and other edtechs, we will advance learning AI and provide personalized learning through 3 distinct phases. First, we will focus on developing student learning profiles with an initial focus on reading, writing, and dyslexia detection, so that we can provide tracking and adaptation in an already familiar NEDI platform. Next, we will focus on matching the right content to the right students in the right classrooms, building on their strengths and preferences, focusing on an efficient and scalable solution to personalized learning. And the last step will provide insight into for each individual student into how they learn best, and even providing them with this learning profile and insights as they change school or graduate and move on to the working life. It's their data, and we believe that they should be able to keep the data wherever they go. So as I mentioned, I will be taking an industrial PhD, and as our last slide here today, I will be talking a bit about these the expected papers in this PhD. The first 2 papers are set aside for dyslexia detection. We have access to some existing data sets here, and first we will experiment with deep neural networks to see if we can improve the current state of the art. And also recent meta reviews point in the direction of multimodal networks as the future big step in dyslexia detection. So we will combine our data sets and provide a proof of concept into a multimodal approach, so that, for example, we can use both text and maybe a recording of students reading a text, various data to detect dyslexia and assess reading and writing skills. The next group of papers will focus on personalized content. As I mentioned, scalable solutions here is very important. There exists some content on personalized learning, but it's more of a focus on utilizing pre-defined graphs of learning, so that if you like item response theory, this requires a lot of work from the teachers or a pre-existing class and access to the class. So rather, we will focus on using existing content and providing parallel alternatives for classroom education, so that maybe one student learns best with videos and another student learns best with text. And then we provide the teacher with both alternatives when planning the activities. And lastly, we will focus on each individual student, insights into their learning behaviors, and attempting to optimize study techniques based on their profiles. And lastly, we will evaluate our solutions based on real-world Norwegian classrooms. Thank you very much for your time.
So that's very exciting. And of course, as you put out, I know some things about this before. So how do you consider testing in the real world scenarios? Is that important to NEDI, or is that something that is more like compliance considered?
Sure. Yeah. It's very, very important. In doing the preliminary research, one of the main things found that there are several like prototypes and stuff out there, but what we're lacking is actual implementations and testing in the actual real world. It doesn't help if you have some cool technical solution if you haven't actually used it in the classroom and actually designed it in a way that teachers want to use it. So real world testing is very important.
That sounds exciting, and we look forward to hearing more about this in the debate, because now we're transitioning over to Njål and the game play system. And gameplay is also meant for pupils, but in this case, early identification of first graders at the risk of developing reading and writing difficulties. So there's a lot of overlap here with NEDI, but at the same time, they want to have a positive experience for children. The pupils will play a learning to read game, while algorithms will look at hidden clues in the game. And Njål, we're very exciting to hear more about what this gameplay system really is. Could you tell us a bit?
Yes, thank you, Morten. Okay, so thank you for inviting me here. This was really interesting, the previous presentation, and there's a lot of overlap. So this is super nice to learn about. What we're looking at here, if you can see my screen, you can see some graphs, I hope.
Yes, we see them.
Yeah, these are just data collection numbers that I do just monitor a little bit. I'm doing this project called Gameplay in Oslo with students in Oslo, school starters. So these are kids that just started schools, and these are just the numbers that I have participants. So I have actually reached 1,500 kids playing a learning game, a serious literacy game on iPads, and they do this 10 minutes a day. That's the ideal. But as you can see, like, they were supposed to start at this point, but when you do research in the real world, it's like, okay, they're coming in, but they didn't start when they were supposed to start. And the red line has the registered, that's the potential players, but not all of those have actually been playing. So that's just the background that this is going on in this actually today. And for a few more weeks, in total 5 weeks, I guess, we're gonna collect data. So this is a innovation project funded by the Norwegian Research Council in collaboration with Oslo Kommune, Municipality. Since they are interested in digital tools, and they have a large, it's a large municipality with many kids. So we were able to get funding from the Research Council for this project. And it's about detecting school starters which are at risk for developing reading difficulties. So when they start school, many don't even know how to read. So it's really, really early, but the science says that early intervention is more effective than doing it after a few more years later. So it's important, and we know that with the present science, we can detect about half of the students if we do extensive testing during the first months of school. But we want to beat that, and the idea is to use machine learning, basically, on log data from playing a serious literacy game. So we want to do this in a fun way so that students and teachers don't feel any stress during detection. So the game itself, the app, it's called Graphel Game. It's a serious literacy app developed by reading researchers in Finland and translated to Norwegian context by Norwegian reading researchers. And while playing this game, they actually learn about connections between sounds and letters, and how to read or practice reading short words. So it has an effect just playing it. So it's not like they waste any time doing this. It's a educational tool that we're using as database in a sense. But so we have already done research which indicates that the progress through this game has predictive power for detecting reading difficulty. But we want to use more of the information in the play in playing the game than we used in the previous article, which was just the progress, really crude measures. So now we collect everything, timestamp everything going on in the game. And then we would need machine learning techniques to analyze the data. And this is supervised learning. So how do we know which ones will develop reading difficulties? That is based on data that will come downstream, like in 1 year or in 2.5 years. We'll do the kartleggingsprøve, which is a test, very psychometrical valid test for reading skills. So those numbers will be then merged with the log data, and then the algorithm will try to learn, calibrate itself to predict the ones on the lower end of the scale, reading scale. And this would mean if this works better than existing method, then it's quite easy to design a tool for teachers in their portal which they prefer that could, give a red flag or an orange flag for certain students based on their gameplay. So that's the whole idea. We don't know if this is going to work. It's the first project like international which has been published about trying to use machine learning on app data to detect reading difficulties. Okay, so the game looks like this. It has fun elements, so it's no stress, it's fun, and they learn actually by playing it. And if our project is successful, we can also use the gameplay to detect problems and to give, like the previous talk was about personalized learning. It's not personalized learning it's more like you can give personalized, at least, detection of reading difficulties. So we can then ask the teachers to find some way to help this kid that's in danger of developing reading difficulties, but which otherwise wouldn't maybe appear to be in danger. So this is a tool for teachers, and then they can try to decide what to do about it. So yeah, this is fun. And yeah, if this works, it might be one way of, we could try to do this in mathematics or develop it in some other ways to make more use of machine learning in Norwegian schools. Okay, thanks.
That was great to hear, Njål. Could you say more about how is the teacher really supposed to use this? What type of information is the teacher getting from this app?
I mean, yeah, the teacher gets information from the app already. In terms of the game, the Finnish game, this Grapho game app has has a page where they can track the progress of the students. Like how many letters do they master, how many short words do they master. But our project will just give the information to the in addition to this, that okay, this is a kid that has some traits, has some behavior in the game that's correlated with reading difficulties later on. So that will just be a simple panel that they can use in Connexus or whatever portal they use to get additional information.
Okay, that's great. So you give the teacher additional information. That sounds exciting. So let's move to the last speaker before the debate, who is Diane Saplatsan. Maybe I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but at least I know that you're a senior researcher at the University of Oslo, working in the Robin Group, Robot Intelligent Systems, and has a PhD degree from 2020, also from University of Oslo, and has worked on accessibility, human-computer interaction, and human-robot interaction, and universal design. This is exciting to hear more about. So Diana.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Morten, and thank you, Nora, for the invitation. A little bit on my background, as you also mentioned. Currently, I work on the project which is called Vulnerability in Robot Society, VIRUS project, in the Robotics and Intelligent System Research Group. So I mainly focus on robots used in healthcare, home care, and focusing on investigating safety, security, and privacy issues. However, in my PhD, I focus both on, I had a project both on robots, but also on another project focusing on digital learning environments and universal design. I wish to take up today some critical points, and my talk is a little bit more general since now my current research focuses mainly on care robots. However, I can see some overlaps between AI and education and care robots. And also my interest is divided into these two fields, the field of e-health and care robots, as I said, and also education. So first of all, I wish to highlight a legal perspective and then to give some examples of applications powered by AI, and then to reflect a little bit on ethical dilemmas, the role of AI in education. I don't know whether I will have time to go through the whole talk, but we can take up some of these things also during the discussion otherwise. So first, I wish to highlight the Artificial Intelligence Act and what it says about AI systems used in education, which says that they should be considered as high risk. As they say, AI systems are considered a clear threat for the safety, livelihoods, and rights for people will be banned. This is the systems that are going within unacceptable risk. And this includes AI systems or applications that manipulate human behavior to circumvent users' free will, such as toys using voice assistants, encouraging dangerous behavior of minors, but also systems that allows social scoring. And one of the high risk elements in the AI Artificial Intelligence Act is the educational or vocational training, as they say, that may determine the access to education and professional course of someone's life, such as scoring of exams. This is considered as a high risk. They also define the AI system used in education or vocational training as determining access or assigning persons to educational and vocational training institution, or to evaluate persons on task as part of or as a precondition for their education should be considered high risk. And I think this is important to highlight because this legal perspective is also at the base of how we create educational applications and how we use AI in education. Some applications related to AI in education refer to accessibility and AI, and here are some examples. For instance, machine learning can help with producing text in plain language, such that the information that is understandable by a large audience for different groups with varying levels of proficiency in a specific language, but also for people with cognitive disabilities, such as people with writing and reading difficulties, as also the previous speaker has mentioned. Other applications using AI in education could be real-time captioning during lectures, text summarization for people with cognitive impairments, but also translation, for instance, of image recognition for students that have some kind of visual impairments, but also, for instance, real-time translation to another language. Another application could also be the instant transcription, also for people or students with hearing impairments. And there are available already some apps using AI, such as ABBA or Roger Voice, for instance. Of course, we can talk about AI in education as applications such as automating grading, creating tests and answers, personalized exercises, or personalized learning. But we also need to look at the pros and cons. We need also to assess the risk for focusing only on certain topics, because the algorithm recommends only those topics in the personalized learning. And also the risk of not developing other sets of skills because of the algorithms. It could also be giving feedback to course instructors, where courses needs to be improved, but also we know about AI math tutors, the kind of applications, or also predicting trends in courses, institutions, universities, and so on. Another aspect that I think that it's interesting is the AI used in disability simulators. As designers, engineers, or researchers in AI, I think we need to also teach students about how disabilities are experienced. Now I show the Funkify Disability Simulator, which is a plugin in Chrome, and I'm not sure whether it's driven by AI or not. I don't think so, but it's just a good example of how we can, or perhaps use in the future, AI in disability simulators, which I think it's important for us in order to also experience disabilities for us that are not disabled. Other applications are, as also the previous speakers has mentioned, such as discovering people or students that have writing or reading difficulties. A study from Sweden has shown, for instance, that it takes only 2 minutes for discovering whether a student has this kind of writing and reading difficulties. Whereas otherwise, if this assessment should be done manually, it might take much longer. Of course, other applications are such as VR applications used in virtual labs. In pandemics, for instance, students were at home and most of their work was done on their computers. However, the challenge was not about reading and writing, perhaps, but when they should have some kind of hands-on practice, such as, I don't know, building a robot or something else, hands-on practice. And of course, education in VR would have come in useful here in that sense if it would have been available. And we would also perhaps not always need to invest huge amounts of money in advanced labs in this sense. At the same time, we can open or give opportunities, possibilities for more students to have access to these kind of technologies. Then we also know about AI and robots, such as providing opportunities to learn language. AI is used, for instance, with the NORA robot in teaching students, either people with autism, students, children with on the autism spectrum disorder, teaching language and social skills, but also, for instance, students or children that they have, that they are a second language learner, such as, for instance, children that have foreigners' parents. They, of course, they also open for, thank you, Morten. They also open for challenges which I'm not going to discuss now, but we can take it during the debate. One thing that I wish to point out too, it's not only the opportunities and challenges, but also that is important to include knowledge about AI in our education. There are documentaries and research which shows that many students are not aware or they don't know about AI in school. So not only applications of AI, but also about teaching about AI in schools to give them, in order to give them more knowledge. Finally, I will end with some ethical dilemmas. What would then be the role of course instructors and teachers when we introduce AI in schools? Will AI contribute to increased or decreased digital divide and inequality? the problem of, for instance, over-attachment to the AI device or applications such as chatbots and so on, deception, uncanny valley in robots, safety, privacy, security issues, the cost of providing data for free in exchange of using a tool, device, system, or platform, long-term use, cognitive safety as opposed to physical safety, for instance, change behavior, change social interaction, and so on. So I think it's important to discuss those things as well. Thank you.
So thank you for some very valuable insight there, Diana. Before we start the panel, I'm curious about different levels of risks. We had a specific session on law 2 weeks ago when we delved deeply into this. And of course, you're right, high risk is connected to the education part. But for me, it's different levels. So for example, automatic transcribing of a teacher is less risky than, for example, a personalized teaching or grading or something like that. Does that make sense what I'm saying, or am I?
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree. But I think we should be aware of how we use or how we apply, and I think we should also be aware about this kind of legal perspective.
Right, great. And the audience who wants to hear more about the European Act, we can of course discuss that now, but we had a complete session about it 2 weeks ago called Law and Ethics. So please I'll ask all the participants back in the room. And I think we've now heard about different systems using AI to applications using artificial intelligence and more a holistic perspective. And if we start with you, Erlend, who has not given a talk, could you tell us a bit about your background and also tell us how do you think AI could really fit into the world of education in general? That's a big question, but maybe you have some insight for us.
Yes, thank you, Morten. So my background, I am a machine learning / statistical scientist. I've worked in the industry for many years, and now I'm back in academia. And one of my focuses and one of the things that I enjoy the most while working in the industry is actually to create AI systems that are where users of that systems have a good interaction with that system, so that they feel like that the AI assists them in their work. And that is sort of, I think it's relevant for this kind of topic that we're discussing today. My research background is primarily within natural language processing and time series modeling, and also clickstream data to some extent. And I've worked with, for instance, forecasting future behavior based on clickstream data, for instance. So I think even though I don't work directly on the education system these days, I think there is some kind of overlap. So that was some background. And the question about how AI could help education in a broad sense, I think that's a very challenging question. I can go through some thoughts about my girlfriend is a teacher, so I obviously talk to her about this question. So I think it's hard to answer this broad question. I think it's sort of something that we should investigate in a great deal, and I don't think we have the answers yet. But I think it's about, okay, what are the questions? What are some questions that we can help answer using AI? I think that's sort of a good starting point, and we have touched upon some of them today. Like one is detecting like learning disabilities, detecting the level of a student. That those are reasonable things to try to use AI for. And it could also be stuff like improving the learning products that students have today. How can you sort of reformulate content in order to make it easier to understand to different groups of people? Some kind of information can be hard for a certain type of persons, but while if you present it in a different way, it may be easier to understand. This is something that I think AI can help with doing well. I think a particular thing that I think is very interesting is this thing for people not just detecting the people with the disabilities, but actually providing easier to understand. Let's say to have dyslexia, for instance. Mm-hmm. They will have problem learning, right? From the very onset of their education, they will have problems of learning they will have harder to learn many things compared to other students. And the question is, okay, how can you sort of present the material in a way that it's easier for the people with the disabilities to digest that content? That I think is a very interesting area.
And if we follow that thought a little bit, because Neddy had a big part of the presentation was exactly on detection of dyslexia. Does that resonate with you, Neddy? Not only detection, but also providing text content in a way that supports specific people with specific special needs?
It absolutely does. So we started with dyslexia because there's something already done there, but the main goal is to understand enough about the student to be able to provide them with the content that they would actually need to feel some mastering, because it's like the perfect balance between the challenge and actually being able to master something. That's what we want to use AI to actually facilitate. And that's what we also think we can help the teachers with, because it's such a big part of their job to be able to give 30 students in a classroom that experience every day. And we think that the technology can be used to actually make that happen more so than it is today. And it doesn't have anything to do with the teacher's abilities. It just has to do with the teacher's resources and combined time with the students and the planning. So we're starting with the dyslexia as a way to move further into writing and reading skills more generally. And then, like Alan says, actually be able to both present content in a way that it's available for each and every student so that they can understand it. But it also has to do with the tools, that how can I present what I understand? Because that isn't necessarily by writing the answers in a textbook. For some, that is absolutely the best way to do it. But if we can make the knowledge that is inside every student's head available for the teachers more so than we are today, then I think that is also something that AI can be used to both give the teachers more insight about what does each student actually know, and also how can you facilitate their learning journey even better. So you have like a loop there that we're going to look into as well. Like how can we use the feedback loop or the inputs from both the students and the content that we provide them in a way that we can enhance their learning experience moreover.
And Njål made a big point in his presentation that it is not really a test they're doing, that just happens in the background. They play a game. Is that if I were to download the Neddy app, would I go to a test, or will you check my dyslexia in the background somehow?
Yeah, so we call it a learning universe. It might not be a universe yet, but that's kind of shows the size of what you can be able to do there. And this is done through collaboration with different edtech partners or edtech companies, where you can do some activities in one app, and the data is shared with Neddy, and Neddy would then recommend you to go to the next app to create something there. So it's just the hub that would point you in the correct direction, or the best direction for your further advancement, really.
Is that something that makes sense to your AI mind, Erle?
Yeah, I think so. I really like the way that the way you're going with the Neddy. One thing that I think is very important, though, is to have the teacher involved, so that it's sort of that the AI is not something that comes outside and affect the student's life, and the teacher is not involved in shaping their education experience. I think, from my point of view, it seems like it's extremely important to involve the teacher in this process and help the AI also. So it's not only the AI that helps the student and the teacher, it's also the teacher that helps the AI to go in the right direction. I think this is something that I feel a little bit passionately about.
The students should help the AI and the AI should help the teacher in a way. So how is the teacher involved in gameplay, Njål, in your system? We heard about your students play, or the pupils playing the game, but how is the teacher involved other than information provided, or is he or she at all?
Yeah, this is in the research project. It was, a goal to not stress the teachers with additional tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So what they have to do is just make sure that they play on the iPads in this project. But I mean, I'm really into that idea now in the beginning of trying some machine learning in Norwegian schools, that without the teachers, you can't, it's like what somebody told me about humane AI. Also, the philosophers, we have to be careful with the branches that we work in, that it's not feeling alienation towards what we're doing. So that's why I always tell them that, okay, you're gonna get some feedback, very simple feedback, just maybe a grading of the students in three categories. And then it's up to you with your knowledge and your skills to take action and do as you are the one working in the classroom and that knows these students the best at the current level of AI, at least.
But in my mind, it is, you could choose to give simple feedback, easy to read for the teacher, but it kind of is not the same as giving a lot of insight. So kind of maybe it's a balancing point. So
yes.
you give a lot of information, but it's too much. You give little information, it's too little. Is that something you?
Yes, of course. My project is unbalanced in the sense that I just want to see if the machine can classify students better than existing and resource demanding methods do. But it's hard, when you work on this, to know exactly what's best to do, because it's not dyslexia. Like reading difficulties is super complex, different kinds. Is it the phonological skill that's lacking? Is it cognitive, or is it attention deficit? It's really hard for us to, at this point, I would imagine, to give instructions that the teachers are supposed to trust over their own judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Diana? So we're talking more and more about the tools as decision support systems. I would, if we use that word, kind of improving this decision of teachers. Most of your talk was about AI in general being used, but what role has a teacher?
Yeah, I want to say that I think it's very important to be aware of how we market these tools and to be transparent about what the tool actually does. Because if we market it as a game, yes, it's nice, but we need to also be transparent about what we look for. And that's an essential point both for teachers, parents, but also I think it's we have this moral responsibility towards also the children and the students. They will be the future. So I think it's important to be transparent towards that. Then I also think that with regard to teachers, I think it's important to reflect a little bit upon the role of the teacher, what is actually the role and how will the role of the teacher change once that we introduce this in education. And perhaps a third thing that I think we should be clear about is whether we use these platforms or tools as a part of the educational system, or part of the institutional educational system, or as supportive tools that the students or children use this in their private time. What do we target, and whose responsibilities is what kind of responsibility, and who has this responsibility? Because I feel that we need to separate things in order to clarify this.
Right. And if the systems you've heard about now, NEDI and the gameplay system, so what role would a teacher ideally have in such a system, you think? So let's make sure that they're perfect in some way. What would they're detecting learning difficulties, etc.
I think that the role of the teacher in this case would be of a facilitator, I guess, between ensuring the students' in a way rights, privacy, and so on at the level that is possible, having being in touch with the parents and so on if they are like under 18 and so on, and to be a facilitator to make sure that things are done right, I guess. And also to fulfill that the learning outcomes that are part of a course to be fulfilled are still fulfilled, although using these applications.
Do you see, Alan, do you see the role of a teacher in an AI-based world, let's say a couple of years into the future, as a facilitator, or someone who makes systems, or someone who trains an AI, or what is the role of a teacher?
I think it's like a collaboration in a sense. That's what I would like to see. Sort of, it's you have some systems that you collaborate with. You can some tasks are more suited to do for a computer, and some that you and one thing that I want to sort of also stress here is that I think that AI systems can also help making teachers do less biased assessments, for instance. I think it's sort of an interesting aspect to because let's say that you have a class of some people and you have like multiple teachers judging, assessing some students. Mm-hmm. Then making sure the AI can help a group of teachers to provide less biased assessments and help making sure that things are fair. So I think that a lot of discussion on AI lately has been on that it can be like biased and unfair, but it also go the other way around, that it can actually help the system be more fair. So this is also something that I hope for the future, that instead of looking at the bad sides of unfair AI, maybe AI can be used in a different way to make the world more fair and make education fairer to students as well.
Fair doesn't necessarily mean that you give fair grades, but maybe use your time in a proper way, maybe.
Yes.
So
for sure.
And we can follow that thought a bit, but and part of that is in Diana's talk, she mentioned about things about social skills, etc. But there's no class called social skills. It's called math and Norwegian and something like that. But still, that's something that's being learned by kids. Is that at all in any of your apps, Nedi or Njol? So this kind of educational things that students should learn, but maybe don't.
Do you have any examples, Martin?
Yes. So to collaborate in a group, for example.
Yeah, I mean, we think about that as part of I mean, how do you learn? That's part of the learning profile for sure. Barbara asked the question in the chat as well. She talked about learning styles and how that's a myth, and I totally agree. And I think it's it's good that she pinpoints that learning styles does not. It's not a thing. It's more about designing the optimal learning activity for each learning goal, and the fact that would look different for different students. And to get back to your question, Morten, when it comes to how do we learn, the fact that we learn in different ways would also be part of the learning profile, because we get to see that some people need to to word out what they mean and what they think, to be able to understand. And that's also part of what we will look into, but we see that we need some data points that goes to you internally before we see how you work with different people at different times as well.
Yeah, because how much is it about preference? I will ask you, Dina. So how much is it about preference, and how much is it about pushing you outside of your comfort zone, which could be good, right? So if I prefer to watch a movie over reading a book, maybe I should read a book because it helps me.
Yeah, so that is part of what we're looking at. It might also be different answer from day to day, because it's all about, okay, so you read the book yesterday, so maybe you should then because if the focus is mastering the reading skill and not necessarily understanding what you read and training the reading skill, then you should absolutely read a book. But if it's more about understanding the topic that you're now learning about and be able to understand it, reflect upon it, analyze, and then tell the teacher what you understood, then your reading skills shouldn't necessarily be the thing standing in your way to actually learn something. So that is also like the way we weight things, like what's more important and what should we prioritize. That's where we need to use the teacher as the facilitator, as we talked about, and how we optimize the learning and also the focus, because the AI can do some prioritizing, but the teacher understands the whole learning context and should therefore be able to design from the beginning until the end. But the AI will give you the suggestions based on what it's been told to prioritize, and then the teachers can say thank you, but no thank you also, and optimize the learning activities from their point of view and what they know about the students.
So Diana, what do you want to?
I was just I just had some thoughts regarding the learning styles or these learning profiles that we need to be also aware of. That now I don't know about NEDI exactly, like how at which students they target, which ages and so on. But in general, about the learning styles and learning profiles, we need to understand that children may develop these learning styles during time, and I don't think we should label children having a specific learning style too early, because that might also come with some risks of not developing, other skills and so on. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. So Nedi, you can answer that quickly, and then we'll.
Yeah, I think we're not using the term learning styles at all. I think what we talked about earlier this webinar was preferences, and preferences can change, and that's a dynamic living thing. And we know that the second grader, 1 week dinosaurs are the thing to read about, and that's why you should read about dinosaurs when you are training your reading skills. But the next week you've done something really cool over the weekend, and then it's insects or fish because you had an experience and you want to build on that. So it's all about making it dynamic enough to be able to catch up on those changes as well. But it's all about motivating the students to actually be able to challenge themselves in the best way possible, so that we get the learning outcomes possible within like their potential and where they're at right now.
So this type of dynamic word, is that something you consider in your gameplay system also? It's kind of adapt over time.
Yeah. Well, you mean I got hung up in those profiles? Is
that
what?
Okay, we can talk profiles.
Yeah.
What do you mean by profile? Yeah.
My project is limited since I don't have any. I just have a 3 or 4 year time scope. So, but I was considering with all this data that we collect, if you can look into kids and say, okay, these kids resemble each other in the way they play, and answer. But I'm not sure, and that would be a publication, of course, like a par with the one that Nedi was planning to do. But what can anyone tell me a little bit about the profiles? What those would be useful, because then there's an automatic, scheduling of those profiles to those kind of learning tools and other profiles to those kind of learning tools. Is that the main idea? With I'm not talking about learning styles, but learning profiles. Yeah.
So, Erlend, do you have a comment on learning profiles and artificial intelligence in some way?
I must say that I actually don't on that.
So we're running out of time, so I guess learning profiles could be a different talk, but let's ask you, Erlend, then a question, and we'll ask the rest of the panel the same question. If you think the world of AI and education, how can NORA and NORA Startup be the best help for such a world?
Yeah, so I think that NORA can be help as a facilitator for creating connecting people who work in AI and people who work in education, and to sort of connect people who are interested in doing research and pushing that front forward, and helping with designing good products based on it, and also creating data sets that are open, that can be used for research other places in the world as well. And I also think I think that's the main point.
Educational data sets, collaboration, these type of things. Diana, educational data sets, is that something that NORA could, is that a good use of the NORA resources, you think? Or is it something that we should spend time on?
Yes, definitely. I think that NORA could perhaps collaborate with UIO in terms of there is this services for sensitive data, but they also had just launched, I think in June this year, the EduCloud. And I think that there UIO and NORA and so on can collaborate more on storing data sets and so on. So, to build on data sets where we can use later on in research and teaching.
Yeah, we actually applied for some money to do that together with UIO. So good idea. What do you think, business people? Let's start with Neddy and then we do Noel. So how can a startup get help from an association like NORA Startup?
I think what you're doing is very, very good. I keep doing the podcasts. I really like them. It's a perfect way to pass the time when I'm traveling to Oslo. Listen to a deep dive into AI topic is really good. And the networking and making sure that the AI community in Norway is standing together and pulling in the right direction. So I think us and Neddy, we really like to work with the right people to work together. So making sure that the right people meet each other is that's a thing I think NORA will be able to provide.
Great. And the last word goes to you, Njål, all the way to the Stavanger region. How can NORA reach out this far west?
Yeah, I like this. It was really useful for me as a isolated academic in my office. So for me personally, this was super interesting, and to share data is always a good idea. And I have lots of data, so I would consider sharing.
We'll take that word up on you, because so Njål has some data. We need to finish because people all have other meetings and some have tacos to eat since it's Friday. This has been a NORA Startup webinar. If you're interested in NORA, if you're interested in starting up a company, if you're interested in doing more research in artificial intelligence, NORA.ai is probably the place for you. So go visit the website and meet us again in next week, where we have a NORA webinar, and in 2 weeks where we have a NORA Startup webinar. So have a nice weekend, everyone.
Take care.